Hey everyone, welcome to another episode of Swan Signal Live. My name is Sam Callahan. I am the lead market analyst at Swan Bitcoin, as well as your host today. Before we get started, this great show, I want to bring up Pacific Bitcoin. Pacific Bitcoin is the festival that we throw every year at Swan in beautiful Santa Monica. If you grab tickets today, you will get 20% off if you use the promo code SIGNAL. And if you pay in Bitcoin, you will get an additional 21% off today. So check it out at pacificbitcoin.com. Last year, it was a fantastic event, full of great speakers, workshop, and side events. It's just a special event that's kind of different from other Bitcoin conferences. So go check it out. It's a fantastic time, pacificbitcoin.com. If you're interested in getting your tickets today, you can use those discounts. I also want to bring up our exclusive mining partner of Swan Signal, which is Marathon Digital Holdings, which is the largest, most technologically advanced, and energy efficient publicly traded Bitcoin miner in existence today. Their goal is to increase the computational power or the hash rate of the Bitcoin network to make it the most decentralized and secure monetary protocol in the world. So go check out the wonderful work they're doing over at Marathon at marathon.com today. So to this show, we're going to talk about Bitcoin education. And we have two of the biggest names in Bitcoin education joining the show to talk about all things orange pilling. They recently came out with a course. I want to bring onto the show Natalie Brunell, host of Coin Stories, as well as Stephan Livera, host of the Stephan Livera podcast. Welcome to Swan Signal, you guys.
Thanks for having us.
Thanks for having us.
Yeah, so typically you guys are on the other side of the conversation. So I'm happy to kind of talk to you guys because I think you guys do some of the best work in the space in terms of educating people about Bitcoin. Natalie, you do a good job of explaining kind of the larger problem as well as how Bitcoin solves it. And then Stephan, I think you do a great job kind of digging into some of the nuances of how Bitcoin actually works, some of the technical aspects. So I think we're going to get two great sides of Bitcoin education with having you guys together. And I wanted to start with kind of asking you guys a little bit about your background, but also that light bulb moment. Like, what was it for you guys that let you realize, oh, this Bitcoin thing is something that I want to spend my time working on? And it made sense to you? Because I think a lot of people come to Bitcoin and they get overwhelmed. It gets very confusing very fast. There's a lot of jargon. So what was that moment for you guys? I want to throw it to Natalie. What was that light bulb moment when it came to Bitcoin?
Sure. So my family is definitely a representation of working for the American dream. My family came here from Eastern Europe. They grew up under communism. But the American dream stood for this idea that you can come from anywhere. You can come from poverty and really make something of yourself if you come to this country and you get an education and you work hard. And I started to think that maybe the American dream has declined or no longer exists in some capacity when I graduated college because my family lost everything in the great financial crisis. And I saw all of my peers working super, super hard, but making very little money and not able to acquire an asset like a home that was once much easier on one income. And so I had a seed planted and I realized that there's something wrong, but I didn't know that I was looking for Bitcoin. And it's something that I share in the Swan course, the educational materials. It's like a lot of us, I think, had a pain point and we were searching for Bitcoin, not knowing what Bitcoin is, or maybe not even recognizing that the problem is that our money's broken, that inflation is a tax on all of us, and that it leads to greater and greater wealth inequality and a concentration of wealth and the haves and the have-nots, and a greater concentration of also political power. And so for me, the light bulb moment really didn't happen until I read the Bitcoin Standard, which was the start of my educational journey that led me ultimately to interviewing all the amazing voices and names that helped me understand Bitcoin. And now I'm just thankful to work in this space and help educate others.
Yeah, great. I mean, everyone comes from different standpoints. And so certainly your upbringing is going to impact you. It lets you kind of understand Bitcoin. What about you, Stephan? You kind of come from a libertarian Austrian economics. Is that kind of originally what led you to realize Bitcoin's potential?
So I would say that was what primed me for it. But actually what first got me into it was reading an article in, I remember it was December 2012. And so this article, like most people, you might have heard of Bitcoin or seen it mentioned and just thought, okay, maybe it was kind of, okay, maybe it's just like Fortnite V-Bucks or it's like World of Warcraft coin or something like that. It's like game money. It's not real. It's not actually trying to do something. And then this article that I read, that I basically stumbled across this article, and it spelled out, oh wow, this can actually challenge central banks. And I was obviously very supportive of that idea already, because I was already primed to believe in that. I was already, anti the idea of fiat currency, because I saw the injustice of the system. This idea that just because this person first, they get to win, and everyone else in society is just paying and holding the bags, right? Like, you're just kind of, most people are just not benefiting from that system, and there's this kind of unjust way in which a few people at the top are just benefiting massively, and there are all these cultural problems to that. And I mean, there's so many different kind of rabbit holes and areas that we could go down with that, but fundamentally it's just so unjust, and it really robs society of so much of our productivity, our prosperity, and even at a cultural and family level, there are things that we are missing. We're missing out on those things because of the injustice of fiat currency. And so that was why, for me, I was already very well primed to sort of understand, we need an alternative. And so prior to Bitcoin, I was more in the gold bug camp. But then once I saw Bitcoin, it made so much more sense to me that this was really the answer. And so from basically early 2013 onwards, I was effectively shouting from the rooftops about Bitcoin. I couldn't stop shouting about it, telling anyone I could. I think a lot of Bitcoiners have that phase where once you get really into it, you're just trying to tell anyone and everyone about it. And so, in those early days, you sort of have less success in teaching people about Bitcoin because you haven't honed your message as well, or maybe they aren't ready to receive the message, right? There's a saying people say, when the student is ready, the teacher appears or the master appears. And I think for a lot of people, whether we like it or not, they're not ready to receive the message. But that said, something somewhere and someone may be the person who can help them do that. And of course, that's what we were really hoping to do with Welcome to Bitcoin, is to really craft a course that can have the best chance to try to figure out what this Bitcoin thing is.
Yeah, you bring up the point of rabbit holes. And I think as Bitcoiners, we kind of forget that people aren't down that rabbit hole as far as we are. And it can be easy to use jargon like permissionlessness and decentralized and just assume that they know what we're talking about. And we forget that everyone kind of starts from the beginning when it comes to Bitcoin. And so you guys started this course, this Welcome to Bitcoin course. So first off, congratulations, because it's been a crazy success so far. Over 120,000 views on YouTube in 3 weeks since it launched. And let's back up a little bit and just talk about how that came to be and what you guys kind of contributed to that project, because I think it's so important. It's going to be a tool that's used for people for years to come in terms of being that intro for them. So how did it come to be? What were your guys' roles? Maybe throw it to Natalie.
Yeah, I mean, it's crazy how long ago these conversations started. Swan obviously has a priority to create a lot of educational materials. They wanted it to be free so that anyone could access them at any time with no barrier. And so those conversations took place a long time ago. We shot, actually, I believe it was back in March of this year. So then it went into editing, and we have a phenomenal editor, Hurley. Shout out to him, because he turns words into visual magic, and it's always been such a privilege to work with talented editors like himself. But I can't take credit for the writing, because Stephan largely led that, and it was really great to be part of a series that really tries to reach out as that first touch point to maybe the people that are still outside of the world of Bitcoin, looking in, curious but skeptical, and help them understand from the very beginning that really this addresses the fundamental problem with our broken money, the fact that it's really difficult to save, the fact that inflation is this regressive tax on all of us, and break it down in a very simple, approachable way. So yeah, I'll let Stephan kind of take it from there.
Yeah, well, yeah, firstly, great job with it, Natalie. And I guess from my perspective, it started basically as, it was an internal project inside Swan. It was myself and a few other people, Nick and Brady and Brandon, Jasmine, and a few others out there. And Hurley, of course, and some of the guys working on the video production side of it. We were basically looking for, how can we craft a course that would be the best way to help new people on board. Now, many of us, especially those of us who are podcasters and things like this, we've done, I've made other courses and other things. I've made a course for Michael Saylor's Saylor Academy. I'd written different things. We had Swan Bitcoin Canon. We've had various educational efforts, but I sort of took some of the learnings over my, well, now close to 11 years. At that point, it was close to 10 years, where I took some of those learnings from talking to people and just trying to craft what are the key things, what is the structure going to look like, just roughly. We worked together as a team to pull some of that together and try to put things in a way that appeal to new people. Because as you said, it's very easy to go, when we talk about Bitcoin, sometimes we talk about it to people in ways that are not accessible. We talk about things like technical details. We talk about overly nuanced ideas and very sort of esoteric concepts almost that seem very bizarre to somebody who's new. And so I think that it took a lot of coaching and sort of, wrangling of the material with, a few iterations on what it's going to look like, who are we sort of going for. So I think those are a few things we had to really think about. We had to think about what are some of the common questions that a new person has. And I think one thing that helps here is if you're regularly talking to new people, then you might have an idea what are some of the questions that they have in their mind. So as an example, if you go to Bitcoin meetups, I'm often going to Bitcoin meetups, whether that's conferences or just local Bitcoin meetups, you're talking to new people and you're hearing the questions they ask. And that can be a really useful thing because that can give you guidance on where is their head at? What is it that a person who's new to Bitcoin, what kind of questions are they asking? What kind of mental models are they operating on that a Bitcoiner can help coach that person on how to think about that in a different light, think about things that they may have not considered before. And so I think it was really just a matter of pulling together the right material and then crafting it. And obviously we went through a few rounds of review. I can't take credit for all of it. Like there was obviously a team behind it. And of course, Natalie's input into the scripting also was very valuable. I think it really took a team effort. And I think it's something that it would have been hard for any one individual to really deliver this, right? Like it needed people who could sort of work on the scripting side of it, do the sort of delivery side of it, and sort of craft it into what it became. And I'm pretty proud and happy with how it turned out.
Yeah, and I think people learn in different ways. There are book resources, there are podcasts, there are longer form videos, and if you add up this whole course, it's about an hour long. There's short form content, and I think that it addresses the fact that people like to learn in different formats, and there's something for everyone. And this is kind of another added value to the community because there are so many phenomenal resources out there. Stephan has another course I know on hope.com that Michael Saylor has put out. So there's so many places. It's like if you haven't heard of Bitcoin by now and started to go down the rabbit hole, then you might be living under a rock. And the material is really approachable. So I'm just really proud to be a part of the educational efforts, and also just being a female voice as well. I want women to feel like this is approachable. They see themselves reflected in the industry, and they can learn from someone maybe that looks like them, and that's something that's always made me feel comfortable. Like I wanted to learn from other women and network with them. So I hope that that's another added benefit as well.
Yeah, no, I think it's absolutely going to be a benefit. And I think many Bitcoiners struggle to onboard people. I mean, sometimes it's like banging your head against the wall when you can show them the performance, you can talk about how it's a new technology, how it improves upon the system, and they just don't seem to get it. And so I'm sure you guys run into this all the time, given your guys very public facing. You probably get a lot of emails from people asking you, where do you guys usually start when you kind of start to educate people about Bitcoin? Do you just go immediately into what it is? Do you talk about the problem? What have you guys found is the most effective way to kind of open that conversation?
Yeah, the way I often, and I've said this for a long time, you won't see the point of Bitcoin unless you see the problem that Bitcoin is trying to solve. Without that, we're just a bunch of internet coin nerds and weirdos on the internet, right? Like that's what we look like. But once you actually understand the problem of fiat currency, and then now that person is more open and amenable to actually learning about Bitcoin. I think the other aspect of it is coming back to what I was saying about when the student is ready, the teacher appears. Sometimes there's people who are just simply not ready to learn about Bitcoin. And now there are things you can do to try and see if that person is ready. So as an example, you might be able to ask questions that might help expose something that person doesn't understand as well as they thought they did. A quick example would be, oh, hey, that money in your account, do you know it's not actually all there? And it's not really money, and maybe it's not even yours, right? Like if you can ask a provocative question that sort of forces people to stop and think, whoa, hang on a second, maybe I don't actually understand money as well as I thought I did. So now maybe I do need to learn a bit more about actually, hang on, what is wrong with the current fiat banking system? What is the issue with that? Now, if you talk to most people, they, especially Americans, they probably might think back to the GFC or something like that and think, oh, wow, well, there was problems that went on then, but they haven't really resolved those issues. And for most people, they're just going through life. Maybe they earn their paycheck and they spend it on food and rent and whatever, and it doesn't go any further than that. But once you start to ask those questions of, oh, okay, why is something wrong with the monetary system now? What could there be out there that's actually a better monetary system? What would that even look like? Oh, okay, there's this Bitcoin thing, and actually it has better monetary qualities. And I think this is where I think we leaned on some of the material or some of the explanatory tools or pedagogical tools of our friend Vijay Boyapati, right? So he's famous for the bullish case for Bitcoin, and he's now recently joined the team working at Swan. And I think his particular framework of sort of spelling out different monies and comparing, let's say, gold versus fiat versus Bitcoin, I think is a very useful pedagogical tool. And so that was part of where I thought, yeah, we can leverage some of that into this course. And obviously, if people go through the course, they can sort of see some of the similarities there. But we also layer on other aspects to the course to sort of try to make it something that people can go through in an hour, and also contextualized for where people are today, where maybe they sense that, okay, it's hard to make ends meet. Like, what's going on here? Why is that? So those are a few things that I think can help people start to see the point of Bitcoin.
Mm-hmm.
Jeff Booth gave me the advice that you have to meet people where they are. And that has been really powerful for me in educating others, because I think when I started, I just kind of threw a lot of information at people. But when you're really far down the rabbit hole, it's sometimes hard to pull yourself out and think about what it was like in the beginning. And everyone has maybe a different frame of reference for why they would find Bitcoin to be meaningful and appealing. But I think one thing that everyone can agree on is the cost of living is going up and the price of things is going up. One thing that I put in my recent episode of the News Block is a comparison of the grocery prices between Home Alone's 1990 grocery run to today. And it was like nearly a 250% increase over the span of a couple of decades. Now, we're told that inflation doesn't really exist. If you follow financial news, they'll tell you that inflation was like 1% or negative. They wanted, Janet Yellen wanted to create inflation, but they couldn't. But the reality is, if you look at the cost of living versus what people are making, there has been a complete divergence. And so one thing that we address right off the bat in the course is talking about the idea of, well, why are things getting more expensive? Why is your home now your savings account? Why is that? There are things in society that we seem to accept. It was Ben Franklin that said two things are certain, death and taxes, right? But I think we don't realize that one of the taxes is inflation. It is a tax that none of us vote on. It's making everything around us more expensive, but our money is slowly losing value, and we're not accruing it in our productive capacity as workers. And that's the big problem, because it has led to the wealth concentration that I mentioned earlier. And so when you start to unpeel those layers, I really often get very thoughtful responses of, oh my gosh, I didn't realize that, I didn't think about it that way. And while originally people maybe celebrated that, oh, their home went up in value, or their parents' homes or grandparents, well, you will ask yourself, when you go to sell that house, you have to purchase another one that is extremely expensive. On top of that, you're paying property taxes based on these high valuations. And is the house really worth that? Or is it just because our money is worthless and
Hmm.
just being diluted in value? And so I think that when we start to question those paradigms and the things that are so long held and accepted, that's when you start to get that thoughtful curiosity of, okay, well, how does Bitcoin address this? Why do we maybe want scarcity in money? And why do we want something that's not controlled by a monopoly, a small group of people and central bankers? And that's been the most fascinating journey for me, is helping people understand that. And it's something that they maybe knew and recognized, but didn't think about.
Yeah, it seems like people don't understand that inflation's not this natural phenomenon. It's man-made. It's a policy decision to basically erode the purchasing power of people's money over time. And it doesn't have to be that way. And there could be other ways to protect yourselves. But people just never even thought about this stuff. But they feel it every single time they go to the checkout line at the grocery store. They feel it, and they're kind of wondering, what's going on here? This seems to be getting out of control, especially over the last couple of years. And it seems like that is kind of forcing people to start to question the system. And then obviously Bitcoiners have been talking about this stuff for so long. And I was wondering, for you guys personally, who do you think does a really good job of educating people about Bitcoin? Like, maybe there's somebody listening here who's new to Bitcoin and they follow you guys, because I think you guys do an excellent job. But who, for you personally, do you think they do an excellent job of meeting people where they are and explaining Bitcoin in a way that's approachable? And maybe listeners could follow them to kind of learn more about it as well. So who has influenced you?
I mean, I mentioned Jeff Booth just a second ago. I would say that he is one of the most thoughtful educators out there, and I highly recommend everyone reads the book Price of Tomorrow. It's not a Bitcoin book, but yet it totally points in the direction of why we should all have Bitcoin. And I think that he just does a really good job of explaining the inflation deflation conflict that we have now, that you need ever expanding credit to produce less and less value. And we just have to keep going further and further into debt. And this is all really unsustainable. It's essentially no better than a Ponzi scheme. That's what fiat is. But he lays it out in such like a thoughtful, non-combative way, and I really appreciate his delivery style and how well researched he is. And he talks about what this type of wealth concentration leads to. His book Price of Tomorrow points out, even, and this was before the pandemic, so these like statistics are even more dramatic now, but he points out that we haven't had this level of wealth concentration since the 1920s, before the Great Depression and before the big crash. And that obviously leads to things like populism and people starting to divide themselves. People are trying to figure out who to blame. And unfortunately, so many people have turned to politics, when politics is not going to solve the problem. Unfortunately, under both red and blue leadership, we have driven up the debt and continue to expand the monetary supply. And asset inflation benefits a small class of people. And so everyone else understandably feels really left behind, and they don't feel like they are not only not represented, but they feel like no matter how hard they work, they're never going to catch up. And that to me actually strikes at the heart of why we see a bit of a moral decay in society and people no longer being good to one another. Because if you lose the dignity that comes with work, that you actually have value and you can preserve the value of what you work hard to earn, then what is the point of working, right? If no matter how many hours you put in, you can't get ahead and you can't get to that next leg, you can't climb the social mobility ladder, what gives you the motivation or the incentive to continue to work hard? So I think a lot of people have that spirit of feeling like they've just given up. I feel like it's pervasive, especially with young people who feel like they will never own a house or never be able to overcome their student loan debt, or have the kind of lifestyle that maybe just a couple generations ago was easier. And that's really sad, because because that does signify that there has been some sort of death of the American dream, because every generation is supposed to be better off and more prosperous than the one before. And it is a motivating factor, not just to work hard for yourself, but really for your family. So many people put their lives at risk, and they do dangerous jobs, and they work long hours, not for themselves, but to better their families and their kin and their offspring and their descendants. And yet for so many people now, it's just gotten so hard that they feel like they will never be able to catch up. And that's not a system that creates cooperation and prosperity and opportunity and abundance for all. That's a situation that creates chaos and division and polarization. And I think we're seeing a lot of that right now.
Yeah, something I just want to add there on the whole generational conflict aspect, which is that if you look at many of the governments around the world that are in a lot of debt and they have a big welfare state, and imagine the perspective for somebody who is maybe in their 20s and they're just starting their career out, and they're being asked to go to work super hard, pay into this welfare Ponzi. But by the time that person turns 65, that welfare Ponzi will not exist for them, right? So think about the generational sort of injustice of that the fiat currency system allows this kind of intergenerational wealth transfer. And I think that is really what is starting to hit a lot of people, especially in the Western world now, not just in America, but I'm hearing similar stories in Australia, in the UK, various countries around the world. People are starting to get to a point where they think, wow, yeah, like Natalie said, my parents lived a better life than I will. And that can be very confronting for people because it sort of seems unnatural in some ways. Now, yeah, I think there's points where we can sort of go back and forth here. Like you could say, okay, fine, we have the internet today, we have smartphones today. There's certain aspects that are certainly better, but there are other aspects that are much worse in terms of the support for having a family, the ability to buy a home, because what's happened is the fiat credit system, the leverage effect, have created this crazy dynamic where to buy a house, it's so many multiples of a person's annual salary. Whereas, rewind the clock 4 or 5 decades, and it wasn't that many multiples of a person's salary. It might have been like 3x that person's annual salary. Whereas in parts of the world today, it's 10x, 15x, 20x in some places, and it just feels like it's completely out of reach. But yeah, to answer your question, Sam, I think I guess for me, who was influential for me when I was sort of first coming into it was maybe Australian economists, people who I was reading their work. They weren't necessarily directly in the Bitcoin world, but people like Bob Murphy, people like Tom Woods, Guido Hulsmann, Mises and Rothbard, people like that. I'd say from the Bitcoin world, I think it's hard to go past Safety Namusa's The Bitcoin Standard. I think that is a very just a phenomenal book in terms of how it's structured, and it starts out by explaining just the history of money and what were some of the historical problems with money, and then only then it gets into Bitcoin and why Bitcoin. Of course, safety can be a little more on the polarizing side. Of course, I understand that, but I understand he's not everybody's cup of tea. But I'm proud to call him a friend of mine, and I'm a big fan. I think it's a great book for most people to sort of get. If you just kind of had to read one book that sort of taught you most of what you needed to know, that would be it. But there are so many other pathways, podcasts, videos, articles, all kinds of other material, depending on what kind of person you are, what kind of thing might resonate for you. So yeah, lots of different approaches, and it's a good thing now that there's so much different material out there.
Yeah, and I just want to give a shout out also to Lynn Alden as well as Michael Saylor, who I think cause us to have to level up because they are just so brilliant. And I really appreciate that they are able to distill things from their engineering and institutional backgrounds that really make the Bitcoin message so much more effective. From Saylor, I learned that you should short the currency, go long property, and let's dematerialize property. And those types of messages you might not hear from like the average Bitcoiner or educator, but they are really powerful. And once you are a little bit further down the rabbit hole, there are these like little aha moments where you just realize that this is truly transformative and incredible. And we are on the front lines of such an important change in society.
Oh, there's a lot to unpack there, but I agree with all your choices. Safety, Lynn, Jeff, those are, and Sailor. Those are the four of the best right there. So totally agree. And you guys brought up like young people. It's no surprise that we're seeing adoption rates from young people of Bitcoin much higher than the older generations because they become so disillusioned with the traditional financial system. They feel like it's failed them. And so they actively look for it and they're more technologically savvy. And Bitcoin just seems to make sense. They get it a lot faster than older generations. Do you guys like change your approach based on the person's age, or is it kind of the same thing every single time? Do you guys knock home the problem and then the solution, or do you kind of alter your delivery based on the person's age?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think there are elements of your approach that you might have to tailor for age. So, as an example, if you are speaking to a more wealthy boomer, then maybe you're thinking about, you're trying to put yourself in their shoes. They might be thinking about passing on wealth to their future generations, and then you might be approaching it from that angle. You may be having to speak to like, also the other angle is, depending on somebody's age, they may have had more time to accumulate wealth, right? And that's just a normal natural thing, like not just a thing from 2023. It's always been the way that older people have had more time to build up more wealth, and so maybe for them they have some more wealth to be able to try to preserve with Bitcoin, maybe depending on what they've done in their life. So that's just one example. But I think it also just comes down to who's open-minded and who's closed-minded. And I think sometimes it's not even that much about the age of the person. Sometimes it's just their life experience or what kinds of things that they are working on or doing, what industry they're in. Because for some people, they're trapped in a way into sort of more of a conform with the system thinking. Whereas somebody who's maybe a little more open-minded, who's maybe open to sort of questioning elements of why the system is the way it is, those people are more easy to reach, and those people are a bit easier to teach about Bitcoin. And so I think those are some things I've just noticed in my time trying to teach people about Bitcoin.
I think you have to really address people individually, because there are young people with very old souls and there are older people who are super technologically savvy, more so than even young people. And I think that you really have to approach people again where they're at. And I think that one of the amazing things about Bitcoin is it really is for everyone. It addresses problems that different generations face. Obviously, people who are younger have sort of grown up with this technology. And pretty soon, as Vijay Boyapati pointed out, we will have a whole generation that has never known a world that existed without Bitcoin. So maybe it is more natural that they understand that money is digital. But at the same time, I feel like because there's so much wisdom in older generations who have seen the bubbles and the crises and just the ups and downs of financial markets, and may recognize that there is an issue. A lot of them tend to probably be gold bugs if they're going to appreciate Bitcoin first, because they recognize the importance of scarcity and a lack of ultimate control. But I really think what's amazing is meeting people from all walks of life and all ages who come to Bitcoin and share common values. And we're all more alike than I think the media give us credit for. A lot of us, again, we're trying to better ourselves, better our families, and everyone can agree that they want hope, right? We all want hope that the world's going to be better, that the world's going to be more fair. And right now the world isn't fair and people feel it. And what's crazy is competition and a return to actual capitalism would make it more fair, would make it more inclusive, and wouldn't just sort of rig it to benefit the people at the top at the expense of everyone else. And I love what I think RFK Jr. said at some point, and it's amazing that he's a Bitcoiner, but he said that basically in our country, what has happened over decades of policies is that we have cushy socialism for the ultra wealthy, and we have brutal capitalism for the working class and the poor. They have to fight amongst each other, and it's harder and harder to get a small piece of the pie. While for everyone else, it's easier and easier because again, you can leverage your debt, take on more debt. Your assets are going up in value, whether those are your big stock portfolios or all your dozens of homes that you own and you're a landlord. So there's just this massive divide, and Bitcoin helps close it and it puts us more on an even playing field where we actually have to compete based on merit and based on value, and more people can be included in that system.
Yeah, well said. I mean, Bitcoin is hope. I mean, I think, Stephan, your course is at hope.com, if I'm not mistaken, right? Sailor.
Right. Yeah. So I think there's a link out to the Sailor Academy course on hope.com. But
Yeah.
I think Michael had made that site and listed a bunch of educators. I think Natalie's there, and I think he put me there and a few people there.
Totally.
There's a range of courses and material out there.
Yeah, Bitcoin is for everyone, and it's important to get that message of hope out there. I think it's easy to say, like, when Jamie Dimon goes and we hear him attack Bitcoin, it's like a reaction from Bitcoiners to like defend it. Like, no, this thing's a good thing. And you can like attack them and kind of get angry at somebody like Jamie Dimon saying he wants the government to shut down Bitcoin. But Natalie, I thought you posted something that was a lot full of wisdom, and you were like, we don't have to be anti Jamie Dimon. Can you maybe elaborate a little bit on what you meant by that?
Yeah, I think it's important to stay positive and constructive and realize that there are people who are incentivized to maintain the old system, and we don't have to be against Jamie Dimon or against the central bank or against Elizabeth Warren to be for Bitcoin. We could just be for Bitcoin and promote its education and its value. And what I really said in that post, which did get more traction than I expected, was that Jamie, he ascended in a system that is closed and opaque, and Bitcoin is very open. And he ascended in a system that has decoupled risk taking from consequences. And there have been all these bailouts we've seen, and it's not a free market. It is crony capitalism. And Bitcoin exists in really the freest market that I've seen. It's based on proof of work. It's based on, contributing value. And I think it's just such a paradigm shift that people like Jamie, who are so embedded in the old system, maybe can't see the light. Also, watch what they do, not what they say, right? Because JP Morgan Chase is actually building up their crypto team. So maybe there's also a little bit of disingenuity in some of what he said. But ultimately, I just think we need to focus our energy on education and bringing people together because you're never going to be able to get people to come to the table if you attack them really hard. I think a lot of people do genuinely not understand this and not understand that it will benefit them in many ways as well. So I think it's always better to kind of be kind and inclusive and say, hey, like, let us help you. And if they decide not to, that's fine. And I'm not saying that everyone in the world will be amenable to these discussions and learning. But at the same time, I think we should try as opposed to just turning our backs on each other, because I think that the power structures that exist in the institutions, the power is concentrated so much that we always feel like we're on this team versus that team and they're against one another. But the best things, I think, happen when we work together and when we recognize each other's value and recognize when we maybe need to learn something and acknowledge we didn't understand or we were wrong. And for some reason, people in power have a difficult time doing that. They can't really admit that maybe they got something wrong, and they should learn and they should evolve. And I really respect the people in power, whether that's in corporations or in the political realm, who do that. Michael Saylor in 2013 said Bitcoin was like sports gambling, and he never deleted that tweet. And he stands by the fact fact that he was wrong and his views have evolved. And Larry Fink, I think, is doing that to some extent as well. But it's like we make mistakes. A lot of us probably dismissed Bitcoin, or we were wrong. I know that I was one of those people when I was younger who was saying tax the rich because I did not understand. I did not understand economics. I did not understand capitalism. And so what seemed like the easy solution, well, redistribute their wealth. It's not fair they got so wealthy, not knowing that we don't have a system that is fair, that is capitalistic. And so I had a lot to learn. And I think that's why we have the saying, stay humble and stack sats, because Bitcoin will humble you. And it should. A lot of us need to be humbled and come to the conclusion that we don't know everything, and we're on this journey of learning together. And Bitcoin makes us all better.
Yeah, I mean, well said. I completely agree. I think the positive message is the way to go about to kind of bring people in. You attract people more with honey than vinegar, and you do an excellent job doing that. It's something that I work on myself, because it's easy just to say, like, start to attack and call out hypocrisy when you see it, instead of just being like, okay, this is what you feel like, but here's where you're wrong, and educate them on how Bitcoin kind of fixes some of these things. And we are seeing a sentiment shift amongst those institutions you mentioned. I mean, Larry Fink is one of them. I just saw a video today that shows his Bitcoin comments throughout the years and how they've changed. And now he's calling it a flight to quality on national television. I mean, it's amazing to see that transformation coming from one of the most powerful people in TradFi. How do you think, this next cycle is going to look a lot different than the last cycle? And it's going to bring in a lot of new people, a lot of new entrants, a lot of new institutions. How do you think this is going to change, and how do we as Bitcoiners educate them about, the underlying values of Bitcoin and what makes it special? Like, I'll throw it to Stephan, like, how would you maybe educate like a Larry Fink on Bitcoin?
That's a tough one. I think we are going to see a new wave of people come through, and they will come for the number go up, right? Whether we like it or not, there'll be a bunch of people who come for the number go up, and it's our job to sort of help teach those people about how Bitcoin can help you be sovereign and some of these ideas. Now, how do you do that? That's a hard question. Sometimes it's a matter of sort of explaining to somebody that this is what makes Bitcoin special, that the fact that you can do this. Because I think when somebody is new, they might have more trust in the system. And because of that, they may see it like, oh, okay, I can just, buy this thing and let somebody else custody it for me. And, and while that's okay for someone to just maybe to get started that way, the way I'm seeing it is you want to advance them down the track and down the pathway to holding their own keys at least, and maybe someday running their own Bitcoin node if you can get them to do that. Now, of course, I understand you can't get everyone to that level, but I think what we're going to see is a whole bunch of people who they previously never really seriously considered Bitcoin, or maybe they had a punt on Coinbase or something in 2017 or 2021, but they never really, took it seriously or anything, or tried to learn about it. Maybe some of those people will now come back and actually, read a book about Bitcoin, or watch some podcasts about Bitcoin, or watch Michael Saylor, or,
Our course.
come to our course. Welcome to Bitcoin, right? Maybe they'll now finally actually go through that course and be like, whoa, actually, yeah, maybe it's time for me to actually go to Swan and learn about that. Like, so I think there are different angles. Each time we're sort of going one layer out, right? So, in the early days, it was like cypherpunks, and then maybe it was like libertarians and people who were into like darknet market drugs and stuff like that. And then maybe there were like macro people, and then there were, each wave has been sort of new groups and classes of people coming in. I think we will start to see just more of a normal investor class of person come into this. And maybe those are some of the people who might otherwise not have paid any attention. And now this is probably the next wave, that we can try to reach those people.
Mm-hmm.
Well, we're obviously going to see a deluge of institutional flows because of not just the spot Bitcoin ETFs that probably will have imminent approval early next year, but also the FASB rules changing and the likes of leaders like Larry Fink changing their tunes and legendary investors starting to mark their seals of approval on the space. But I think there's also another massive group. Actually, Sam, I think you pointed this out a while ago in a tweet and talked about some of the statistics, but millennial women. And a lot of my peer group, they're making good money at this point. Maybe not enough to feel like they are where they thought they would be at the ages they're at, because I can certainly relate to that. But they are, professionals and successful in their various fields, and they want to be able to preserve the value of what they've earned. They want to build wealth, and I think that they're going to start to take a look at this space a little bit more seriously because it has been dominated so much by the men, but they have money to spend and to invest, and so that's the audience that I really hope to reach. Sometimes it's a challenge to figure out what will get them to sort of click, because a lot of them are not on Twitter. A lot of my girlfriends, they don't consume any content on Twitter. They're mostly on Instagram. And so I'm definitely going to be experimenting with ways in the new year to try to reach specifically that audience, because there are millions and millions, probably billions around the world who need to hear the message and to feel like that it is approachable and it's not maybe as techy as they might have thought. Originally, that's why I was so intimidated to read the book, The Bitcoin Standard, is I thought it was a computer science book. I thought you had to be very technical, and I wasn't really interested, and I was also just kind of intimidated by it. And now that I'm in the space and I realize that it's actually about preserving the value of whatever you do to earn a living, it's so much more, I think, all encompassing in terms of the audience that it needs to reach. And I really hope that more and more of the people that are in my peer group, my friend group, get on board, because some of them just haven't been orange pilled yet.
Yeah, something I want to add here is I think it's also about personal finance, right? And I think this is something where, people might have seen, obviously, famously, people like Dave Ramsey, right? Dave Ramsey has the call-in show, and people call up and say, oh, hey, man, hey, Dave, I've got, this loan and this credit card and this thing. And Dave will say, hey, get out, pay down your debts and blah, blah, blah. I think there's a lot of people who just, even in the fiat world, aren't good with money, aren't good at saving. And Bitcoin changes people. So once that person starts, once they come and go to welcome to Bitcoin, swan.com/welcome, they start, then maybe they can start saving. But I think there's a lot of people who are just living paycheck to paycheck. And some of those people are people who are earning a decent amount, right? They're not just like having a very, very low income. They have a certain level of income, but they're just spending above. They're not learning to live within their means. And I think that's really, as you start to learn, then you start to realize, oh, okay, I need to live within my means. Okay, I'm earning this much, I'm spending that much, and I'm saving that much into Bitcoin. So I think that personal finance journey that a lot of people have to go on, that's going to be in front of them. Now, I think Bitcoin in earlier years, it might have appealed to people who were already savings type of people, and so I think that's going to be an important journey for a lot of people in the cycles to come, not just this coming cycle, but this future cycles, is just learning to become a saver.
Well, we're going to see so many of these worlds come together. Obviously, some of the headlines do the marketing for Bitcoin itself when it comes to international hyperinflation levels and authoritarianism and people not able to access money in the bank accounts. But it's going to be really fascinating to see because, of course, number go up is going to attract pretty much everyone. And you're going to have the workers who are like, I want to be able to make more money. I want to build wealth. Then you're also going to have the people at top who obviously want to build and preserve their wealth, but also they don't want it confiscated. And I met someone recently who's part of a very, very wealthy family, a retail giant in this country, and she was worried because the bank would ask her when she's taking out, let's say, withdrawals. They're asking, well, what does she need that money for? And she feels like they're kind of becoming a little bit more pervasive in terms of their monitoring and wanting to potentially not allow her to access her funds. And so she was like, well, I like Bitcoin's unconfiscatability. And it was ironic because I was at the unconfiscatable conference. So it will be really interesting to see how the rich, the poor, and everyone in between are going to come to the value that Bitcoin offers.
Yeah, the course that you guys put on is just going to be such a great resource. And you guys bring up so many great points about the people that are going to come in, and Bitcoin kind of opens all these doors, personal finance, technology. You learn about monetary policy, financial history, and it really does wonder for people to just understand the world more broadly. And I think there is no marketing team for Bitcoin, but there is a community of educators like you guys. And so if you get a text message from a friend, if you're listening to this and talk about Bitcoin, now you can just send them to the Welcome to Bitcoin course, make it easy for them. And it's because of people like you guys that created this great resource for people to go to and make it easier to understand Bitcoin from the beginning. I think it's going to do wonders for getting people onboarded. And so congratulations again. I mean, it's been a crazy success. Some of the feedback, I'm reading a testimonial right now. It says best intro to Bitcoin ever. We'll share it with all my friends and family. And I hope that's the case for a lot of people, because it really is a wonderful, wonderful course that you guys created together. And so I think that's probably a good place to stop. I wanted to throw it to you guys for maybe some final thoughts, and then point people to where they can follow your work.
Yeah, sure. So I'll just say, yeah, it just comes down to meeting people where they're at. It also comes down to, I think, we often go through phases, right? Like, I think many of us who have been down the rabbit hole ourselves go through a phase where we try to push it down everyone's throat. And then eventually you sort of reach a level where you realize, no, I need to be more measured in my approach, right? As you said, you have to meet them where they're at, but then also sort of not just talk their ear off. You have to sort of learn the dance, if you will, learn the kind of the right rhythm to sort of teach somebody aspects of Bitcoin. But I think now that we have this course available, I think it's more about maybe asking a question or two to understand where that person is at, and then saying, okay, well, what if I sent you this, this free course, and you can just do it, and it's only an hour, and it's, swan.com/welcome, and you can, this course has been crafted in a way that will help that person, at least I think, give them a high probability that they can sort of learn in a curated way. Because that's the other thing with a lot of, Bitcoin resources out there. If somebody just searches Bitcoin online, they could find all kinds of crazy info. They could get scammed, they could get led astray, they could get led to some random altcoin stuff. Like, I think that's part of the value of this course, is also that it's curated in a way that a person you can sort of wholeheartedly recommend this course to people, knowing that they're going to get taught about how to save with Bitcoin. I think that's probably the key thing. And obviously, for anyone who wants to find me online, you can search Stephan Livera podcast. Obviously, my show, it's been running for over 5 years now. Range of material, some economic stuff and some technical stuff. And I'll let Natalie pick up from here.
Yeah, no, that's well said. I've been blown away by how well this welcome video series has been received. More than 200,000 views on X, another 100,000 some on YouTube. And it's just been, I think, 2 weeks or so since we released it. So just incredible feedback. I actually got a note yesterday saying, I've been trying to orange pill my retired father-in-law for 2 years. I was not getting there, but chipping away. I sent him the Swan video you made. He wrote to me yesterday, okay, I get it now. How much of my cash should I save in Bitcoin? Thank you.
That's
And like
awesome.
those kinds of messages, just they mean a lot. We need more educational materials. Please watch out for 2024. I'm going to be trying to do a lot more 101 fundamental content, because we're not even in a bull market yet. At least I don't think we are yet. So you can only imagine the amount of attention and interest that is going to come into this space, and newcomers that just really want to start from scratch and from the basics. And so, if you also want to check out my podcast, it's called Coin Stories on every platform, and I'm on Twitter at Nat Brunell.
Yeah, I think Natalie, you're well positioned to orange pill a lot of women in the next bull run. And so, if you're a woman listening to this, Natalie's your person. Go to her, follow her, check out Coin Stories, check out the Stephan Livera podcast. I mean, both of those podcasts are always in my queue. You guys do great work. And the Welcome to Bitcoin course we talked about a lot, but you can check it out. Go to swan.com/welcome. Send it to all your friends and family. Teach them about Bitcoin and let some of these wonderful educators kind of take the reins and teach them about it as well. So welcome to Bitcoin course. Congratulations once again, guys. And thanks for coming on Swan Signal Live. Really appreciate you guys taking the time.
Thank you.
Thanks, guys. See you.
Yep. Well, that was a great episode. And I watched the course myself and I was kind of blown away at the production of it, as well as the content that was created. It was just phenomenal. And so I think it's going to be one of those tools that gets shared for years and years to come. And so it was great to talk with Natalie and Stephan to see how it came to be and get some tips for them of how to orange pill people. So thanks again for them coming on the show. I hope you guys enjoyed this episode of Swan Signal Live. Like, subscribe, share it. Let me know what you think. We got another fantastic guest next week. We got Mr. Alex Gladstein. We're going to talk all things IMF in Argentina, as well to see what he's been up to at the Human Rights Foundation. So make sure you tune in next week for that episode. It's always a pleasure to be your host of Swan Signal Live. I really appreciate all your support, and I will see you next week. Thank you.